Hello. Today I decided that I want to rate the monsters and villains in Doctor Who. Now keep in mind this is all going to be my opinion. I'm just some guy who watched the show as a kid and I like monsters and villains, so this will all just be my opinion. If you really like the Absorbaloff, please don't be offended by my take on that. For whatever reason you may like the Absorbaloff. But yeah, we're going to be focusing purely on the monsters and villains themselves, not the episode. So, you know, there could be a not quite as cool monster, but it's a good episode, or vice versa. But yeah, let's just get right into it. We'll go through in order of appearance. So we'll start from series 1 of New Who, starting with the episode Rose. So the first monster we see are the Autons, basically moving mannequins, plastic people. I thought they were pretty good. I would probably put them in good. Yeah, they were fine. Yeah, you know what? Good's too high. We'll go down to fine. They were just a bit bland. You know, I mean, to be fair, that episode was more about focusing on introducing this new doctor and the new companion, so it would be kind of strange if the monster or villain took the focus of this episode. Although I will give a shout out to the Mickey Auton. Pizza. That was a funny moment, and the bin and that CGI that looked so good on the bin. But yeah, overall, not very scary or original. Then we move on to the episode The End of the World, and this is kind of unclear as to what the main villain or monster is. There's quite a lot in this one. They really start to show off their practical and CGI effects in this episode, but I suppose the standout would be Cassandra, just as a villain, and I suppose we could also lump in those little spider robot things. I would just chuck them in good. She is, I mean, I suppose kind of iconic with the whole moisturize me thing.
Moisturize me.
And those spiders killing people by dragging them and killing them off screen. Not quite there, but a little more interesting than the Autons, so yeah, I can't lump them in fine. Then we move on to the episode The Unquiet Dead. So the main monster in this episode being the Gelf. And I seem to remember the Gelf being pretty cool, a good concept. The idea of ghosts coming from the gas and the candles is fun. They're pretty spooky at times, you know, you got corpses coming up. Again though, I'm not quite sure if I'd put them into great. I think they fit in comfortably in good. Then we move on to the two-parter Aliens of London and World War III, where we're introduced to the Slitheen. This is where I think it's getting a little more complicated, because I really like the design of these aliens. I think they look really cool, and you know, the way they reveal that they're wearing a skin suit, they tear open their forehead and that blue light comes out, and they sort of look like creepy, like baby-like, but they're also like giant, and they have these weird elongated limbs and claws, and really cool practical effects, really cool. But I'm slightly conflicted because of the amount of like farts. It's like you have such a great design, but then they're farting all the time, and it just kind of takes away a little bit. Yes, it's kind of weird and otherworldly, but kind of makes it a little less serious, and it just drops off a little bit. But I think I'm still going to put them in great. Now we move on to the episode Dalek, where, as you could have guessed, the main villain is the Dalek. And yeah, I don't really need to explain this, but this is going in best of the best. Just even in this episode in particular, the way the Dalek is presented and introduced into New Who is perfect. You know, just showing the threat of just one Dalek being able to take on all these people, and how scared and angry the Doctor is when he realizes what they've got. It's just perfect. And you know, there's the fear factor as well. This thing is pretty unstoppable. Just definitely one of the biggest threats, you know, the Doctor's ever faced. And you know, the fact they keep coming back in different forms in the future and finding new ways to become a threat against the Doctor is great. Yep, easily best of the best. Next we move on to the long game. This one's kind of tricky because I'm not too fond of the monster in this one, but I think it's a great episode. And I mean, it's a CGI blob on the ceiling. Like, you don't really see much of it, and when you do, it doesn't look amazing. It doesn't really have much of a presence either. It kind of just has a mouth and snarls every now and then, but it also doesn't help that I literally don't remember the creature's name. With all the good villains and monsters, you remember their name. Like, oh yeah, that's the Daleks, dude. That's the Cyberman or whatever. But no, what is this? Shark blob thing. I think, yeah, we'll just lump that one into fine. It's not quite bad. Then we move on to the episode Father's Day. I mean, I don't know if these things had a name. I think they were something like Time Reapers, maybe. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't really remember. But what I do remember is how great these monsters are. Really scary, awesome design, very frightening concept, and interesting as well. The idea of this is how time corrects itself. These nightmare creatures. And they also have a pretty good scream. Yeah, I think they sit comfortably in the great category. I might change my mind in the future. I feel like they could be bumped up. But for now, we'll move on. Onto the two-parter, The Empty Child and the Doctor Dances, which introduces the empty child. I thought this was great. They are proper scary. The idea of it like spreading, and I thought the effects where the gas mask comes out of the guy's face was pretty scary as a kid. And it just saying like over and over. Yeah, pretty great. A lot of good moments in these episodes, and just I'm not quite sure if I can lump them into great because it's just people wearing gas masks, so they sit comfortably in good. Then we've got a couple episodes where we've already seen the Slitheen, we've talked about them, and then there's the Daleks again in Bad Wolf. Nothing really new here, but I will mention in the Parting of the Ways, the Dalek Emperor was pretty cool. I would put him in just on his own in great. He didn't really do much. It was kind of interesting, but in terms of Dalek variants, there are better. But at the end of the day, he's still a Dalek, and they are easily the best villains in Doctor Who, so it would be a crime to put him any lower than great. Now we move on to the episode The Christmas Invasion, the first episode with David Tennant. Yeah, we're introduced to two kind of monsters here. I say two because one is recurring, the other isn't really, but it's still the main villain. Yeah, the pilot fish, Santa Claus robots. They're pretty funny. I like the way they attack people using their remote control trees and explosive baubles. That might be later, I don't remember. They're fun. It's good reveal when they turn around. I think I'd put them in fine, though. Nothing great. However, the Sycorax themselves, they're going good, for sure. The way that they threaten humanity is interesting, with the blood type thing and everything, and just the design, the skull thing over the creepy face, the red imagery, and their language, very aggressive. Then we move on to series 2 with New Earth. This is the episode with Cassandra again, and I guess the main villains things were kind of like the plague victims. I wouldn't really put those cat people in a villain or a monster category because they don't really do anything malicious. It's more just morally wrong, maybe. Yeah, I guess the plague things are the sort of the main threat in this one. I don't really enjoy this one. Bit of a stinker of an episode for me personally. Yeah, just sort of infected humans that walk around. Not very interesting. I think this is the first one I'll put them in bad, to be honest. Then we move on to the episode Tooth and Claw, where we have the werewolf as the main monster. And I remember the werewolf being pretty cool. From what I remember, the CGI was decent. And yeah, I thought the design was pretty good. It's pretty freaky, pretty frightening. Yeah, I think this fits in the good category. Like, it's not incredibly original, but for the way it's presented, it's pretty good. Now we move on to the school reunion episode, where we introduce the Krillitanes. I think at this point I'm going to do a little reshuffle of the tier list just to make sure everything's in its right place, so that the closer to the ratings on the left, the better they are on that level. Because I want to make sure the Krillitanes are a little higher up than the werewolf because of their originality. So yeah, as you can see, I've put the Krillitane as slightly better than the werewolf, sort of mid-tier on the good section. I remember clearly the shot of them where they're all huddled on the ceiling. I remember that being quite freaky as a kid. Also some great shots of them outside on like the roof of a church or something. I remember that. And from what I remember, they actually had some pretty cool lore as well. It was something like they were evolving backwards or like becoming more beastly. I don't really remember specifically, but they definitely fit into the good category. Then we move on to the episode The Girl in the Fireplace, and I remember I wasn't too keen on this one, but I do have to admit, I do like the monster design quite a lot. And, you know, the practical effects of inside its head were great. The sort of saw and all the great sound effects this thing has. I can't quite remember if they had a name or if it was just the clockwork robots, but yeah, again, they fit in good. Now we move on to the two-parter Rise of the Cybermen and the Age of Steel, where we're introduced to the new take on the Cybermen. And again, for me, this has to be best of the best. As a kid, they were probably my favorite, just as like a recurring villain anyway, but yeah, the whole idea of them being upgraded humans and the sounds, the design, the practical effects, the fact that there's so many of them, this is just perfect, classic Doctor Who right here. But I will say, obviously, just underneath the Dalek, kind of hard to beat. Now we move on to the Idiot's Lantern, where we're introduced to the Wire. Now I really didn't enjoy this episode that much, but I can't quite put the Wire into forgettable or unforgivable because it was so weird and like it still had a lot of character. Yeah, I can't remember exactly what it was she would say, but something like, "I'm hungry" or something.
All your needs will be met.
I'm hungry!
In a minute!
So just because of that bumps it up just into bad, I think. I can't call it forgettable. Now we move on to the two-part The Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit, where we're kind of introduced to two monsters, the Ood and I guess the Devil itself. I don't really remember if it had a different name, but I think Ood fit in great. They're kind of more fleshed out a bit later on, but yeah, they're really quite unsettling, their design. The idea of them holding their brains in their hands, and I remember, it's not this episode, it's a bit later, but they're like steamy, the brains in the hands, and I thought that was a really good effect. It made you feel pretty gross watching that, and the way they attack is pretty great. Their eyes lighting up red when they're angry. Yeah, and their voice is pretty iconic as well.
All Ood are born to serve, otherwise we would die.
Yeah, these definitely fit into great. As for the Devil, I remember this being quite scary. I don't think the CGI when it's revealed is incredible, but the whole possession thing and that guy Toby hearing the like voice behind him, and the symbols appearing on him, the like red eyes and everything. I would say the way that this monster is set up and introduced is better than the monster itself. Like, I guess it's more of a presence kind of monster, like the Ood are like possessed by this thing. But I guess rating the monster just on its own, I would probably put it into good. Now we move on to Love and Monsters. And this will 100% be the first monster to go straight into Unforgivable, the Absorbaloff. As a kid, I thought this was the worst episode of Doctor Who. I hated this creature. It was so unscary and, yeah, easily unforgivable. What is this design? It's got faces in it. Is that supposed to be scary? It's just weird. It doesn't look good. The hair on top and the thong. Why? Awful. Then we move on to the episode Fear Her, where I guess the main villain is sort of like scribbles and like, yeah, I don't remember this one too well, I'm not gonna lie, but from what I remember, it wasn't great. I don't think it looked very good, and yeah, just not very memorable or well done. I think it's gonna have to go unforgettable, to be honest. Then we go into the two-parter of Army of Ghosts and Doomsday. Like we said, we've already mentioned Daleks and the Cybermen. So then we'll move straight on to The Runaway Bride, where we meet the Arachna something. I'm not sure if I can entirely remember this thing's name, but yeah, pretty cool design and great that I think a lot of it is practical, very memorable. The eyes are great, you know, the giant web, and I'll give a little shout out to the design of the spaceship as well. Yeah, just a fun sort of villain. I think this goes top middle in the good tier. Now we move on to series 3 with the episode Smith and Jones, where the main villain, well, there's kind of two villains, but there's the old lady with the straw, who's, if she has a name, I don't remember it, and the Jadoon. I think the Jadoon are fine. They're pretty good. The way they speak's great. They look pretty cool. You know, they're like sort of rhino thing and the black chunky uniform. But I think the concept of them isn't quite interesting enough to bump them into great, so they fit solidly in good. As for the woman with the straw, it's a woman with a straw. So yeah, I'll put her in bad. Now we move on to the Shakespeare Code. With the Carrionites as the villains. I think the Carrionites, yeah, they're pretty good. The idea of having magic in Doctor Who was pretty fun. Near the end, when they're all flying around, I remember they looked pretty great. Yeah, but, you know, again, not incredibly original. They're another one to just fit in the good category. Probably just below the werewolf, I think. Now we move on to Gridlock. And I don't know if these creatures have names, but they're giant crabs, basically. Not too keen on these. Yeah, I think I'm gonna put them in bad, honestly. Yeah, they don't really serve much other than like the episode needed a threat, so they have some crabs at the bottom of this motorway. Whatever. We've got a couple more Dalek episodes, and then we move on to the Lazarus experiment, where I guess the monster is just Professor Lazarus. So I would say the design and concept of this monster is cooler than the way it looks. Unfortunately, the CGI for this guy is a little bit dated, but I still remember that it being fun. I think this would be on the probably lower end good, only because that CGI doesn't look too good now. Now we move on to the episode 42, where we've got this, like, I don't really remember what this monster is. It's sort of like a sun thing. I remember the red mask, and the doctor becoming like infected at one point, but not very interesting for me. Not very scary either. Yeah, I think this one was just gonna go in bad. Now we move on to the two-parter Human Nature and the Family of Blood, where we're introduced to the Family of Blood and the Scarecrows. So the Scarecrows don't really do much, but the way they look is fantastic. The practical effects and the like closed stitched up eyes and mouth. I might be slightly biased because I was lucky enough to meet the woman who did the practical effects for the Scarecrows when I was a kid. But the physical performances of the Scarecrows is great as well. They're walking very stiff. These definitely higher end good. And for the Family of Blood themselves, I think they'll have to be just below the great category. I think I put them just on the very top of good. The only thing holding them back is they are kind of just people, and that's a bit of a disservice to the way that they're acted, but you know, I like my monsters and villains to be a little more interesting or frightening. And speaking of interesting and frightening, we now move on to the episode Blink, where we're introduced to the Weeping Angels. Now, I think these probably are the perfect Doctor Who villain. The concept of them is terrifying. The idea that they're only stone when you're looking at them was great. I think they fit in just below Daleks. The only thing holding them back is I just wish they weren't explained as much as they were in later episodes. I feel like what worked for them so well is the sort of cosmic horror of not knowing entirely what they look like when you're blinking, and you know what they really are. That's sort of called like lonely assassins or something like that, which is awesome. Unfortunately, in future episodes they add too much lore, like, oh, the image of an angel becomes an angel, or when you look in its eye, an angel comes in your eye, or whatever. And that awful decision to show the angels moving in Moffat's episode Flesh and Stone. What were they thinking? And it doesn't look good or intimidating. Yeah. But despite all that, great villain. Now we move on to the episode Utopia, where it's a sort of beginner of I think it's a 3-parter, to be honest. But yeah, the main thing in this one is the future kind. They fit in fine, pretty good. But again, they're not supposed to be the main villain. This is more of a setup for the Master. Yeah, so now we have the Sound of Drums and the Last of the Time Lords, where we have the Master and the Toclophane. We'll start with the Toclophane. The idea of these guys being what happens to the humans was pretty scary. The concept is definitely more interesting than the design itself, Although I will say, when it opens up and you see that face, that was a pretty great reveal. I think they fit in good, quite nicely. The Master, however, definitely best of the best. He's just great. Very fun character, very entertaining character as well, very charismatic.
Funny is like this. Not funny is like this.
And perfect to bounce off of the Doctor, you know, a lot more sadistic character, and it really feels like he's met his match with this reintroduction of the Master. I think, yeah, just below the Weeping Angels. Now we move on to the Voyage of the Damned, where I guess the main villain is, I can't remember his name, it was Max something, maybe? Yeah, he was fine. His motivation was quite funny. Yeah, I think he fits in fine, to be honest. And the Heavenly Host, pretty cool. They look cool, but no, nothing incredible here. Their voice is pretty cool, I guess.
Information. Kill.
The way they throw the halos and the way they fly is pretty funny, I suppose. But no, not that interesting. I'll put them both into fine. Now we move on to Series 4, with the episode Partners in Crime, where the main threat are the adipose. And these, while they're not scary, they are pretty great. Just a funny idea of, you know, taking this pill and these little creatures come out of you and they're made of fat or whatever, and their little teeth, you know, they're kind of cute. I know before I've rated monsters low if they're not very frightening, but these guys are pretty unique and fun, and yeah, just because of that, I think I'll put them in good. Then we move on to the episode The Fires of Pompeii, where the main monster are these pyroviles, I think they were called. These guys are cool. The CGI isn't incredible, but the design of them is great, and I've got to mention, I think some of my favorite practical effects in Doctor Who is on that weird, like, stone woman thing. I think that looks great, really unsettling. And the fact that it's all hidden behind that curtain at the beginning and then revealed. I think they both fit nicely near the top of good. Then we have the episode Planet of the Ood, and we've already mentioned them, so we'll move on to the episode The Sontaran Stratagem, where we're introduced to the Sontarans. These guys are very fun. Cool design. It's funny that they're like these little aggressive potato men. I like their little weak spot on the back of their necks. Just their whole attitude is very funny with war and stuff. Like, they're very charismatic. There's a lot of character and depth there. I think I'll put these just at the bottom of great. You know, they're iconic enough to fit up there, but not quite as cool as some of the others. Now we move on to the episode The Doctor's Daughter, where the monster is this creature called the Hath, and I think these are so dull and bland. I do not care about these fish people. For one, they don't even talk, which really doesn't help. They just make these bubble noises. They're pretty much, they could be people. They might as well be people. The only thing that's different is they have fish heads and they have bubbles. But yeah, I guess that's not the focus of the episode. But either way, boring, whatever, forgettable. At this point, I also just had to make sure that the Absorber was at the bottom of the bottom, because yeah. Now we have the episode The Unicorn and the Wasp, where the villain is the Vesper form, and I think this is great. The giant CGI wasp looks pretty great from what I remember, and also the performance of the human form of the Vesper form or whatever is pretty memorable and funny, you know, with the constant zzz, zzz.
Mine. What's to stop me?
I think top tier good. Now we move on to the two-parter Silence in the Library and The Forest of the Dead, where we're introduced to the Vashta Narada. Awesome concept, the shadows that eat flesh, and then iconic as well, the voice lines repeating the "Hey, who turned out the lights?"
Hey, who turned out the lights?
Really cool horror, to be honest, in a kids show. And the way the skull falls into the light, the way they, again, I keep mentioning movement, but because I think it's really important, especially if you're trying to show something otherworldly, but the way they walk is very stiff as well, kind of like the scarecrows, which means you can tell it's no longer human, which is brilliant. And then just, there's so many iconic moments that this monster has, like the, oh no, you've got two shadows or whatever. Yeah, these guys definitely go into great. Then we move on to the episode Midnight, where I don't even know if the threat has a name. It's like this weird entity that sort of possesses people and steals their voice or something. Really cool concept, executed very well. It's pretty scary, but you know, rating as a monster, I can't put it very highly because it doesn't really have a physical form, and that is a lot of what I'm basing these ratings off of. But despite that, still cool. So I think I'll put that in sort of mid-good tier. Now again, we're at one of these positions where the episode is great, but the monster itself isn't that interesting, unfortunately. Yeah, the Time Beetle in Turn Left, really cool episode, and its powers are interesting and what it does is interesting, but as a monster by itself, I unfortunately can't rate it that highly because it is just a big beetle. Which is a shame because, like I said, the episode's really cool. A lot of good, interesting ideas there, but as a monster itself, fine. Then we move on to the episode The Stolen Earth and Journey's End. And it's at this point that I've realized I've sort of skipped over a few Dalek variants because these two are very Dalek-focused episodes. But I'll quickly go over the Daleks that we haven't mentioned so far. So I've put the Cult of Skaro in Great. I just remember them being very sassy and powerful, especially with the other Cybermen. I remember there's a lot of sass there, a lot of good lines.
You are superior in only one respect. What is that? You are better at dying.
But they're great, of course, because they're Daleks. Then we've also got to mention Dalek-Sec Hybrid, who I've put at the bottom of Great, only because the only thing I'm not too keen on is his voice. I feel like the design is very freaky and awesome, but he's still got this kind of weird, human-y voice, which I'm not fond of.
That man, their leader, Solomon, he showed courage.
And then we've got, I can't remember what this guy's name is. Was it like the Supreme Dalek or Commander Dalek? I don't remember, but the red and gold one looks really cool. And it was like a fun play that he was sort of more in charge than Davros was, despite the fact that Davros created them. I think this one is slightly better than the Emperor Dalek, so I'll put him just above. And I've also put Davros in bottom of best of the best, because he's a pretty great villain. The way he calls the Doctor's friends the Children of Time is pretty awesome. The fact that he made the Daleks from his own flesh is great. His voice is amazing.
Welcome to my new empire.
He's just very disturbing and evil. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. He's Davros, he's great. Then we move on to the episode The Next Doctor, where the main villain is the Cyber King, which is pretty cool, like a giant steampunk Cyberman. It's a fun idea. Funny that it needed children to power it. I'm not entirely sure why that was the case. But yeah, it's cool to see a giant Cyberman towering over Victorian London. But again, it's not incredible. It's fine. I think I'll put it in the good category. Then we have the episode Planet of the Dead, where it's like those fly people and the flying sort of stingray looking things that like eat metal. I'll put these in sort of one image. I don't think the website has an image for both, unfortunately, but again, these guys aren't amazing. They're whatever. They're pretty cool. Like the fly people look freaky. It looks great, but you know, neither of them are very interesting as concepts, at least to me. So they'll both go in the fine category. Then we move on to the episode The Waters of Mars, and this episode to me was the scariest episode of Doctor Who. It was scarier than Blink. And Blink actually scared me quite a lot, but I think the design and concept for this creature, the Flood, I think it's called, is some of the best horror in Doctor Who. The idea that just one drop of water is enough to turn you into one of these zombies with the like cracked skin on the face and the black inside of the mouths, the terrifying hollow eyes. It's really quite disturbing, especially if you're a kid watching this show. And not only that, but their sound design, the way they scream. The way they infect others. I remember there's some really freaky poses they do in the garden. Maybe I'm biased, but for me, they're best of the best. Then we move on to the two-part of The End of Time, Part 1 and Part 2. where we have the Master again and the Time Lords. Yeah, I guess this is one where the episode is more interesting than the villains. They're just a bit generic, kind of villainy, like, oh, we're gonna come back and take over because we need this planet now, and not amazing. But obviously you got the Master in it, which helps a lot. So, but as the Time Lords on their own, I think I'd put them in good. Now we move on to the Moffat era of Doctor Who, onto Series 5, where the main villain in this episode is Prisoner Zero and the Atraxi. Prisoner Zero, his shape-shifting power is pretty cool and unique. I like the way it uses the coma patients and the way that the voices, there's a bit where he sort of messes up on the voices and the voice of the woman comes out of the little girl, or like the voice of the dog coming out of the man. Yeah, pretty fun. Again, not incredibly interesting though. Put that in good. As for the Atraxi, yeah, again, they're fine. They look cool, but they don't have much going for them. So yeah, I just put them in fine. Then we have the episode The Beast Below, where I guess the main villain is all these smilers or winders or whatever. I really like that they're practically done. This is nice. They do look pretty great in that little box, but not very interesting or unique. So yeah, another one for the fine. Then we move on to the Victory of the Daleks, where we're introduced to the new Dalek variants, which are bright and colourful for some reason. I'm not a fan of this design. I think they shouldn't look bright and colourful. I liked the bronze and gold kind of look, so not a fan of this. But, you know, they're still Daleks. I think I'll just put them in fine. Then we have the two-part with the Weeping Angels, so we'll skip that and move on to the Vampires of Venice, with these sort of fish vampire looking things, which we actually don't see a lot of, unfortunately. Most of it is just like, oh, scary women with teeth. Not great. But I think the design of the fish monster things themselves, the fish vampire things, is cool. So, I don't know. But like I said, you really don't see it much. So, unfortunately, another sort of fine monster. Just, it's fine. Then we move on to the episode Amy's Choice, where we're introduced to the Dream Lord. I really like this guy. I think he's really fun. He honestly reminds me of the Master. He's very charismatic, and I love that he wears like different costumes depending on which area he's in the dreams. Yeah, just a lot of a fun, goofy, charismatic villain. And I think this is the first Moffat era villain which I'm gonna put in great. Then we have the two-part of the Hungry Earth and Cold Blood, where we meet the Silurians. See, the design of these creatures I really like. I think the mask is awesome, and the practical effects of the green scales and everything, their armor is cool, and the idea that they've had the Earth before us is nice as well, that they were up there before we were. But I just think they're not quite as interesting as I'd hoped they would be. So yeah, that's gonna have to be another monster that's put in the good category. Next we move on to the episode Vincent and the Doctor, where I don't actually remember the name of the monster. I also don't think it was a very good design, and I think from when I know it was mostly invisible, but when we did see it, it did not look good. Genuinely, some stuff in like previous seasons looked a lot better. Yeah, just not a fan of this thing. I almost feel like it would have been better if they put more of a budget into showing the destruction it causes, instead of the CGI of when we do actually see it. Although, if I was a kid watching it, I probably would be disappointed to find out that you don't even see the monster after all that, so. But as an adult, I feel like it would have been more effective to not show it at all. I'm gonna put it in the bad category. Then we have the episode The Lodger, where James Corden is put in Doctor Who. Oh boy. Shut up! And the villain is something that stands at the top of the stairs. It's like holograms of people. Bad. This one's just going in bad. Then we have the two-part of the Pandorica Opens and the Big Bang, where the main villain is sort of everyone, I guess. There's an alliance of Daleks, the Cybermen, Sontarans, all that. I won't count this because there's already enough on this list, so we'll just skip that. Onto A Christmas Carol. The main monster, I guess, is a fog shark, which is basically just a shark. Fine, I suppose. I'll put it in fine. And at this point, my memory isn't incredible, so I would probably have to have a rewatch of the later seasons in order to do a second part, but thanks for watching, and let me know if you want another one, if you enjoyed this, and Also mention any of the monsters that I skipped over. There are definitely some smaller monsters that I didn't mention. So let me know in the comments how angry you are about the fact that I forgot your favorite monster. And let me know if you disagree on any of my takes. Bye bye.